It's a colonial enterprise. They invade and conquer Palestine. There's a war, the 1948 war, and the Egyptian army goes in with rifles that don't work. They had tanks that were profoundly flawed, like tanks that could only turn in one direction, or the turret didn't turn, or the machine gun didn't work. They were mostly, I don't know if they were mostly, but a lot of them were Stuarts, which were these little itty bitty tankettes. The Israelis were better armed, better equipped. They had more combat experience. There was a bunch of them. There was a huge invasion force. The Jordanians made an attempt to stop this. The Syrians fought. There were Iraqi units that showed up as volunteers. Nobody could stop the Israelis from creating the state. By the time they were done, the Israelis ended up with 78% of Palestine. So the UN division of Palestine created 3 Israeli wedges, one in the middle, one in the northeast, and then one in the south. And then it created 4 Palestinian wedges, one that was about twice the size of the Gaza Strip, where the Gaza Strip is like the remnant of it, one that was probably about 1 1/3 times the size of the West Bank, where the West Bank is, and then one in the northwest. So, like Bethlehem was supposed to be in the West Bank, and then Haifa was supposed to be Palestinian. And by the time the Israelis were done, they had shrunk the West Bank, they had dramatically shrunk the Gaza Strip, and they just took the remaining piece. There were 4 pieces because Jaffa was going to become a little enclave in Palestine that was completely surrounded by Israel and the sea. And then Jerusalem was going to be a neutral zone, and it was going to be administered by the United Nations. That was the plan. And the Israelis, of course, broke the whole thing. Old Jerusalem or East Jerusalem ended up in Jordan. West Jerusalem ended up in Israel. And the Israelis, during the conquest, committed some acts of terrorism. So there's a place called Deir Yassin where they conduct a massacre. And the hope was to cause panic in the Palestinian population, to cause them to run away. And they did. A huge portion of the Palestinian population flees, fearing that Deir Yassin was just the beginning of a series of massacres. One of the catastrophic ironies of all of this is Yad Vashem, the Holocaust memorial, is across the valley from Deir Yassin. So it's almost like there's the commemoration of a terrible, cruel injustice across the valley from a terrible, cruel injustice. Instead of the world creating more justice, it heaped more suffering on a population of people that had nothing to do with the initial suffering.
Do you believe the 1948 war could have ended differently if the international community had enforced the original UN partition plan? Why or why not?